Russell Spatz. I'm an alcoholic. I'm a member of the South Dixie virtual meeting group, and we meet every day at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and you're welcome to join us. It's a great meeting. I think we've got about 50 people from all over the world that show up. And I am 75 years old, and my last drink was, when was it? January, you help me out, January 25th, 1981.
That's right.
This is my emotional support human. I'm 75. I'm not as sharp as I used to be. By design. I intended that to happen. It wasn't an accident. But if you get old, Alzheimer's and senility helps you out with that, you know. And I told my wife the other day, I said, I think I'm emotionally sober because my mind is blank. And he says, no, you're just senile. It's the difference. You know, so I'm in my 44th year of sobriety, and I'm going to talk a little bit about my experience, strength, and hope, and possibly about the second step.
No way.
And I'm going to, this is actually a warning to you. I'm going to try to, especially for new people, I want to warn you as to what you're actually getting yourself into. This is a bad situation. It's too late for me. I've been around here 44 years. I've been warped. But not for you. Save yourselves, you know. I'm just going to give you a warning. And, you know, this AA thing, it's pretty much twisted me up. I see everything backwards and upside down. I used to know the truth. I used to know everything. I was very, very smart. I believe I was cool. You've seen the pictures, right?
Oh, yes.
And now AA has de-hipped me, and I'm stupid. But happy. Stupid and happy. So I'll tell you how warped I. You know, they say that alcoholics are delusional. Has anybody ever read that we're delusional? That we can't separate the true from the false? That our alcoholic life and thinking seems the only normal one? And then you come in here and you run into these guys with 30, 40 years and they tell you stuff and you say, these guys are crazy. They're crazy. Like my sponsor, I think I told you this story, it bears repeating. Some guy bounced a $500 check on me. It caused me to bounce a bunch of checks, and I was telling everybody in AA that I could talk to about what a jerk he was and what he did to me, and I couldn't stop thinking about him. And my sponsor, Bob Sullivan, came up and he says, you know, keep on talking about this guy, you know what I mean? And he says, yeah, he bounced a $500 check. Yeah, I know. I've heard it 1,000 times, and you know, I just shut up, stop talking about it. He says, yeah. I mean, how would you feel if somebody bounced a $500 check? I mean, of course, that's what alcoholics do. They say, well, if it happened to you, you'd feel, you know, because we feel everybody. That's what my sponsor says. You know the problem with you, Russell? You think everybody should think like you think. And I say, yeah, of course, you know, then the world would be wonderful. And they'd all be happy if only I ran the world. And he said, well, how would you feel if it didn't bother you? And I looked at him, I said, the guy had like 20 years. How would you feel if it didn't bother you? And I said, I mean, I chose him to be my sponsor, I think, because I wanted what he had, although I didn't know what he had. I said, how would you feel if it didn't bother you? And I said, I don't understand the question. Would you understand that question? You guys are brighter than me. If somebody bounced a $500 or $1,000 check on you and you were pissed off and upset about it and your sponsor came up and said, how would you feel if it didn't bother you? Would you even understand that question? Who would it? I'll tell you, I'm a bar drinker. I drank with a bunch of guys in the bar. If I walked in there and some asshole bounced a $500 or $1,000 check on me, I swear to God, the brightest guy in that bar would never ask me, how would you feel if it doesn't bother you? They would say, we ought to kill that son of a bitch, you know what I mean? And that's what he asked me. Who asks shit like that? Who even think? I honestly didn't. So he said, I'm asking you a question. How would you feel if it didn't bother you? And I said to him, I don't understand the question. I think he asked me a third time. I said, I don't understand the question. And then he finally said, listen to the question. How would you feel if it didn't bother you? And I said, you mean how would I feel if it didn't bother me that he bounced a $500 check on me? He says, yeah, how would you feel if it didn't bother you that he bounced a $500 check on you? I said, well, if it didn't bother me, I'd feel fine. He said, there you go, and he walked away. I've been married for 43. Anybody here been married for 43 years? Man, there's a lot of shit that used to bother me. you cannot stay married for 43 years if shit bothers you. I can tell you that. You know.
Right.
The other day she said, "What kind of?" The other day I was in my office, my home office, and I have a little. I had at that time. This was about years ago. I had a little 5 or 6 year old granddaughter named Andrea. She's gorgeous now. And she came in. She was in the kitchen with my wife. She came and she says, "Grandpa," I said, "What, Andrea?" He says, "What kind of fish are you?" I said, "What?" He says, "What kind of fish are you?" He says, "What kind of fish are you?" I said, "What kind of fish am I?" He says, "Yeah, what kind of fish are you?" I said, "I don't know, Andrea. What kind of fish am I?" He says, "You're a selfish."
Cindy
You know,
agrees.
you've been. My wife's mad at you, Cindy. You didn't call her up when you were down here. You know, so when you're married for 43 years, you hear things like you haven't changed in 30 years. You know, a little selfish. You know. But the good news. You know why I can stay married and be happy, because it doesn't bother me. Stuff doesn't bother me most of the time. I just let it roll off my back. I don't take things personally. So apparently, there's a possibility that alcohol is not really the problem. There's a possibility. Hi, how you doing, buddy? Don't worry about it. You're not late. You're right on time. There's a possibility that the problem's not alcohol. There's a possibility that the problem is alcoholism. And if that's your problem, if you're an alcoholic, then the problem centers in your mind. Because you're crazy. Now listen, I'm not going to explain to you how crazy you are if you're an alcoholic. Because I don't want you to miss the exciting, long and winding road of having the shit knocked out of you by life. I want you to stay sober for 5, 10, 15, 25, 30 years so you can see up front and personal how fucking crazy you are. You can just experience life on life's turn without the booze, without everything, just straight up 3 o'clock in the morning, sucking your thumb, thinking what's going to happen to me. I want you to have the pleasure of experiencing life so you can one day say, now I understand what that son of a bitch was trying to tell me. So now here's the deal. I have, since I think we're going to make this like a second step thing, the last chapter in the book is Vision for You. Does everybody know that? Has anybody ever read that book? The last chapter, is that the last chapter?
Yes.
In the book Alcoholics Anonymous is Vision for You. Now you would think that it would make sense to you, wouldn't it? That if you're going to talk about the second step, you should start somewhere around like the first chapter of the book, right?
You would think.
But since we're going to talk about the second step, I think what I'm going to do is start a Vision for You. I think that if you start a Vision for You, one day you might understand about the second step. Because you know what alcoholics sometimes understand? They understand the vision. The vision. So I want to talk about the vision. So anyway, so here's the deal. So I'm 75 years old. I've raised 4 kids sober. I'm practicing attorney in Dade County for 50 years. I used to be smart. I graduated with Departmental Honors in Mathematics. I was going for a PhD in algebraic topology. I was National Science Foundation fellow, and I met a girl, and her father was a doctor, and her mother was a lawyer, and her grandfather was a lawyer, and one day I wanted to get into her pants, and one day I decided, I woke up one day and I had this epiphany. I had to become a lawyer, Somebody would ask me, well, wait a second, you've been studying, you want to be a mathematician all your life, why'd you become a lawyer? And I'd say because I like Perry Mason or something like that, and I became a lawyer to get in some gal's pants. Now I can tell you guys are much sharper and you have integrity. That's pretty much as deep as my integrity ran, you know what I mean? I wanted what she had and I was willing to go to any length to get it. I'm pretty much a world whore, I want it and I'll do anything to get it, and that's the deal. I have that kind of alcoholism, you guys are more sophisticated than me, but I just want things. I need things. I wake up every morning and say, if only I had this, or if only I had that, or if only I had a different wife or a different girlfriend, if only I've had more money, I'd be okay. And I was basically telling myself I'm not okay. My entire life I've been telling myself I'm not okay. trying to be better, money, property, prestige, people to love me, not being rejected, not being scared, that kind of stuff. So what happens is through a lot of experience, it says each alcoholic in his own. When we get up here, we're supposed to do this is what the Big Book says with his own language and from his own point of view. Okay, talks about how he developed a relationship with God. As a matter of fact, Sandy Beach said any problem an alcoholic ever has to do with separation from God, and the solution is always connection to God. Chuck Chamberlain said that too, and that's pretty much what the book is all about. To find the power that'll allow you to live. They say if a mere code of morals and a better philosophy of life would have saved us, we'd be sober a long time ago. If being smart, if following the rules, if all that stuff would have saved us, we'd be sober a long time ago, but it didn't save us. We lack the power to live. Not the power to stop drinking. Pretty much everybody gets handed the power to stop drinking for a week or two or a month or a year. But the power by which you can live is a whole different story. See, the power to stop drinking is important because you're not getting anywhere if you don't stop drinking. But the power to survive somebody bouncing a $500 check on you, the power to survive cancer, this power to survive the things that happen to you in your life and unfair people and unfair circumstances, the power to survive a flat tire, is different than the flat power to stop drinking. The power to go through all that and live in this fallen world with all the crap that's going on and having the joy of living, that's a whole different deal. How do you get that deal? That's a different kind of situation. And some people just settle for the power to stop drinking. That's okay. Not drinking, that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, I was like that for many years until my time came when it ran out. When the whole thing ran out, and I hit the wall. So what happens is this. So I don't look at this thing because of the things that have happened to me. Because what does it say in the Big Book? We get a new perspective. In the 12 and 12 it says the way we get a new perspective. This is not my opinion. Now listen, I know my personality can be acerbic. It can be kind of push people away. People don't like. This is where you get to practice principles before personality. This is where you get to practice principles before personality. So just ignore my personality if you don't like it. It's okay. But that's okay. Just think about what's the principle here. So here's the deal. The way we get a new perspective is by repeated humiliations and the final crushing of our self-sufficiency. Now, when you say repeated humiliations, that means over and over and over again. The crushing of your self-sufficiency means it's not necessarily like a bad bruise. It's like being crushed over a period. And so the only advantage I have, whether you call it advantage or not, is that I've just been crushed for almost 44 years. And humiliated by almost 44 years. I mean, listen, I've had my credit cards taken away at 10 years because I spend money I don't have to buy shit I don't need to impress people I don't like. Because I believe that the only reason people like me is because I'm rich, wealthy, and I look like I'm doing okay. Because deep down inside, I know I'm basically a worthless piece of shit. Doesn't matter how many degrees I have or what's going on. I know who I really am, and I know if you really ever found out who I really was, you wouldn't like me. That's why every once in a while I'll be lathering up in the shower and I'll hear this voice and it'll say, you're an asshole, you ought to kill yourself. You're never going to be okay. And I don't know whether every alcoholic hears those voices, but I know this, whenever I say that at a convention or wherever I am, 15 people come up to me and say, you're talking about me? And I say, no, I'm talking about me. So chances are if I'm an alcoholic and you're an alcoholic, talking about yourself like you're a jerk, that's basically your real reputation with you about you. That's why we're always fishing for compliments. That's why we're always worried about what other people think about us. That's why we're always telling ourselves that we don't care about what other people think about us, because we lie to ourselves. Because we're crazy. That's part of the insanity. There's a lot of parts to the insanity. So what happens is when I read the Big Book, this book right here, at 1 year, I read this Big Book at 1 year sobriety. Now, when I read this big book at 5 year sobriety, it's a different book. When I read this big book at 10 years sobriety, it's a different. When I read this book at 20 years sobriety, I'm reading a different book. I don't see what I used to see. I see something different. When I read this book at 40 years sobriety, I see a different book. When I read this book at 1 year sobriety, I see the second step somewhere around, Bill's story. When I read it at 44 years sobriety, I see the second step in Vision for You, the last chapter of the book. I just see things that, when I go to a meeting like this, at 1 year, I experience a meeting like this at 1 year. I experience you at 1 year. When I go to a meeting like this with 30 years, I experience a meeting like this at 30 years. Because experience teaches me stuff. My sponsor used to say, when a man with experience meets a man with money, the man with experience will walk away with the money, and the man with the money will have walked away with an experience. There's something about experience trumps intelligence, Hey, listen, if we were so intelligent, what the hell are we doing here? How did we fuck up so badly? If you're so intelligent. Pissing off and hurting so many people. At some point in time, I got to realize that my best thinking on my best day got me in here. People come into my life and I hate their guts, and they're the ones I should be listening to. And people come in here and I love them, and they're the worst thing in the world for me. I'm a star at linking up with people that are no good for me and making me feel good. I don't like people that hurt my feelings. And the reason I'm sober today is because I ran into a lot of people that ate my lunch and told me, why don't you shut up? And I wanted what they had. And that's the deal. So it's a whole different thing. So you may think that I'm kind of crazy, and that's okay, I am. And you may not like what I say, and that's okay. You'll get to be pissed off at me for the next 3 weeks and say, why did they invite him here? And all that stuff. But maybe one day you'll be sitting around and thinking, you'll say, man, that guy was right. Maybe you'll come up to me somewhere when I say, I remember listening to you, I used to hate your guts. I thought you were so full of shit, but now I love you. I don't know. But all I'm going to do is I'm going to honestly tell you what I think, and you can take it or leave it. It doesn't matter to me. Just do what you have to do. So here we go. I want to give you an example. I'm going to read 2 things out of the book, one from Vision for You and then one from Alcoholics Anonymous number 3. Okay, this is from Vision for You. And I'll tell you why I think differently now than when I saw it the first time I read it. Now and then a serious drinker, an alcoholic, being dry at the moment. People come in here. My sponsor used to say, the newcomer is the most important person in the room. Well, I want to say yes because I was trained that way, but here's the deal. I have people in my life that have 5 years sobriety that went out and drank. And I know people in my life that had 10 years sobriety and went out and drank. And I have people that have 20 years sobriety and go out and drink. And 30 years sobriety and go out and drink. I know people that have 30 years sobriety and they're miserable. I've seen people in AA with 30 years sobriety commit suicide. So you got to understand, and nobody figured it out or knew about it because they don't talk about it because of pride or because of denial or because of that weird sort of thing that alcoholics can live miserable lives and somehow tell themselves they're doing okay because they're not drinking. So the not drinking thing, what it does, what the not drinking thing does is it masks the fact they're depressed and you want to kill yourself. Because you could always say you're not drinking. And somehow you'll lull yourself into a state of sort of like complacency until it gets real bad. And some of those people drink and they come back with a new attitude. And some of those people commit suicide. And some of those people don't drink. They just go on take it to the bitter end. You know what I mean? And just never live life. They're just in bondage to fear. And there's all sorts of people in between. So whenever I'm speaking to anybody, there could be somebody here with 25 years or 15 years, whenever I'm speaking to anybody, You see, a lot of people in here, even if you sponsor people with 5 years or 10 years or 15 years. You don't deal with people with 30 years and have cancer. You don't deal with those people. They're not coming to you. So the bottom line is that, so I know what's actually going on over the long range. I don't know everything, but I know the way I see people in AA. So I know whenever I'm talking to an AA group, there's probably some guy in here who's got 11 years, who's going to be drunk in 6 months, but he doesn't even know it. He doesn't even know it. So I have a heart for newcomers. I love newcomers, but I have a heart for people with time. I have a heart for people with time because I know they're hurting too. So this is what this says. Now and then a serious drinker, being dry at the moment, says, I don't miss it at all. I feel better. I'm work better. I'm having a better time. As ex-problem drinkers, we smile at such sally. We know our friend is like a boy whistling in the dark to keep up his spirits. He fools himself. Sometimes I hear him say things like, how you doing? I'm hanging in there. Hanging in there. He fools himself. Inwardly, he would give anything to take a half a dozen of drinks and get away with them. He will presently try the old game again, for he isn't happy with his sobriety. For he isn't happy with his sobriety. Because he isn't happy with his sobriety. He's not experiencing the joy of living. He's not experiencing the promises. He's living a life of quiet desperation. He will presently try the old game again, for he isn't happy about his sobriety. He cannot picture life without alcohol. Someday he will be unable to imagine life either with alcohol or without it. He will know loneliness. He will know loneliness as few do. Hey, if you're sober, now I got some good news for you. You're going to get to experience loneliness as few do. One day, if you haven't done it yet, it's going to be 3 o'clock in the morning, and you're going to be going to meetings and sponsoring people. And you're going to wake up 3 o'clock in the morning, and you're going to realize you're alone. I'm telling you that, so when it happens, you won't panic. You won't say, there's something wrong with me, or this thing ain't working. You'll understand that you're going through something that people will go through, and they talk about it in the book, no matter how much time you have. And what it's saying is, you need to go farther. Not drinking and going to meetings is just not enough, no matter how much they told you. There comes a time that even intensive work with other alcoholics will keep you on that hamster wheel where you may not drink, but you won't be happy. There'll come a time where just doing certain things a certain way without changing your attitude about stuff won't make you happy. It'll help you maybe to survive another day without drinking, one day at a time, by hanging in there. He cannot picture life without alcohol. Someday he will be unable to imagine life either with alcohol or without it. He will know loneliness as few do. He will be at the jumping off place. He will wish for the end. So, when I first read that, this is what I started thinking about. They're talking about people that have 30 days. That's what I thought. They were talking about people with 30 days, 60 days, not newcomers, you know what I mean? But after being around for four decades and reading Bill Wilson's story, when at 20 years sobriety he started using LSD to see maybe that would help him, and then reading his essay, Emotional Sobriety, The Next Frontier, where he was going down the tubes at 21 years, and he didn't understand what was going on, and he said, he figured out the answer, and he said, I've been wrong all along. Hey, that's got to make you feel good. If you worship Bill Wilson, which I did for a while, and he did a lot of great things, if you happen to be worshiping Bill Wilson, you find out your idol, your God, was ready to blow his brains out at 21 years, that's got to make you feel a little queasy, That's why Dr. Bob, who was a whole different person, he recognized what the problem was with Bill. And that's why I looked at Bill, and the last words he said to him was, Bill, let's not screw this thing up. Keep it simple. Don't complicate it. Keep it simple. Get stupid. It's all about only one thing. It's not about all these 12 things. It's not about all these 12 things lead you to one thing. If you don't get the one thing, you'll never get anything. You'll be lost. It's all about one thing. There is one who has all power. That one is God. May you find him now. See to it your relationship with him is right in great events. Your real reliance must be on God. He will even show you how to create the fellowship you crave. It's all about one thing. Don't get lost in the weeds. You know what I mean? I know they're all worshiping you and everything, and he got lost in the weeds, and Dr. Bob didn't. If you went up to Dr. Bob and you said, what's all this first things about, he'd say, seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all things will be added unto you. He was fixed on making God the central fact of his life, no matter what. And understand that, having real faith, because he understood when they say, we never apologize for God. All men of faith have courage. And in this world, you better have courage. All men of faith have. Let me tell you something. Alcoholics. I have a PhD in accepting shit. I said the Serenity Prayer 10 million times. I could accept anything. As soon as somebody said, I can accept the fact that my boss is an asshole. I can accept the fact that I'm not making enough. They're taking away my. I can accept anything. As soon as some guy said to me, he says, I got the solution for you about your job. He says, what's that? He said, well, just get another job. I said, whoa, wait a second. Then I'd have to go out. I'd have to interview. What would my boss find out? Courage. Acceptance is easy because you don't have to do shit. You know what I mean? You just sit around the A room and hope God sends a job down for you. But to actually go out and apply, you know what I mean? That takes a little. All men of faith have courage. They trust their God. We never apologize for God. Instead, we let him demonstrate in our lives what he's done for us through our testimony. At once begin to outgrow fear. How would you like to outgrow fear? You know, one of the promises says fear of people and of economic insecurity will leave us. Fear of people means you don't worry about what they're going to think about you. You don't sit around a room saying, what did I say, or how did I say it, or what are they thinking? You don't say, well, I want to say this, but if I say that, you don't filter yourself. You know what I mean? You just let it flow, and you tell them the truth. And you be something called authentic. You know, and you know what they say, if you want to be rocked in the fourth dimension of existence, experience much of heaven and no peace, all you have to do is get involved in the great fact. And you know what the great fact is? The great fact is, it says, make God the central factor of your life and be absolutely convinced that he lives in your heart and mind in a way which is indeed miraculous. You know. So in any event, I used to think that this had to do with just newcomers. This doesn't have to do with somebody who has 30 years or 15 years or 20 years. But then I experienced people drinking after 5 years. And if you haven't experienced people drinking after they've had time going to meetings, you haven't been to enough AA meetings. You haven't seen enough people pick up chips after they have 20 years or 25. You haven't seen that. You haven't spoken to those people. It happens. You know, and there's a division in AA. It happens around the sixth step. That's the step that separates the men from the boys, the goats from the sheep, the wheat from the chaff. You know, there's a division in AA where there are people that are just not drinking and going to meetings. There are people trying to grow in the image and likeness of their Creator. It's a whole different deal. The separation isn't in the third step or the 11th step or the 12th step or anything. Everybody does that stuff, you know, and sometimes they drink. Separation is, what's the most important thing in your life? If you come day and the only thing you're interested in is not drinking, you will eventually drink. Because this will become like a prison for you. One more day. You'll be marking one more day. One more day without drinking. One more day without drinking. This has got to become something more than that for you. Because when it becomes something more than that for you, you won't drink. You won't drink. You won't have to force yourself to go out there and helping people. You'll be helping people all the time. It'll be your entire life. You will have no bucket list. The dolphin game won't be that important to you. You'd rather be at an AA meeting. Going on a cruise won't be that important to you. You won't be worried about the stuff you're worried about now. So let me read this thing to you. Then I'll tell you a story. So this is in Alcoholics Anonymous number 3 on page 191. So I'm not making this shit up. Okay? Alcoholics Anonymous number 3 was Bill Dotson. I don't know where they have it here. I think they do. They have it in every A room. Maybe they don't have it. Maybe, I think it's in the bathroom.
The man on the bed.
The man on the bed. Has anybody ever seen the man on the bed?
Yes.
That's Bill Dotson. That funny T-shirt that I used to wear when I was a kid. You know, they have the T-shirt he's scrawny as on the bed. Bill Wilson and Dr. Bob are there. They're holding a Bible. Because between 1935 and 1939, That's what they used, the Bible and the upper room, things like that. You couldn't go to a meeting unless you got down on your knees and gave your life to God. Period. End of story. That's the way it worked. And the bottom line is, so you didn't have too many people in AA meetings stand up and say, well, if they had done that when I wouldn't have been there, because you wouldn't have been there. Because that's, in order to get in, you had to get on your knees in front of everybody else, give your life to God. So pretty much everybody knew. It was not only unity of the problem, the fellowship of the problem, it was a unity of the Spirit. It was a fellowship of the Spirit. They all knew it was a God thing, and nobody was bucking it because they had already had to get down on their knees in front of everybody else. And if you know anything about alcoholics they whore themselves to be liked. Their whole life is about, let me be, what do you want me to be? And I'll whore out for you. I'll be that deal. Just don't reject me, So it was pretty clear, just like in AA now, it's pretty clear that people hate God and they hate religion, they hate all that, and they badmouth and everything. Back then, it was pretty clear that the whole thing was based upon God. So the group was not only unified in the alcohol thing, it was unified in the God thing. It was a different deal. So that's why it says God will show you how to create the fellowship you crave. It's godly fellowship. That's why they say, you'll meet some of us in the fellowship of the Spirit, which is different than the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous, because to get here, all you need is a desire to stop drinking. It doesn't have to be an honest one. They threw that out. You know what I mean? But the fellowship of the Spirit is a whole different story.
Yep.
Those are the people that crave being with people that are talking about God, because even if they don't understand it, they want to hear more. They want to hear a message of depth and weight. So anyway, that's Bill Dotson. So now this is Bill Dotson talking. Now I want you to listen to this deal. I want you to listen to this because this probably has to do with you, because it definitely has to do with me. It would be hard to estimate how much AA has done for me. I really wanted the program, and I wanted to go along with it. I noticed that others seemed to have such a release, a happiness, of something I thought a person ought to have. I know, now he's sober when he's saying this. He was a few months sober. He says, I noticed that others seem to have a release, a happiness, of something I thought a person ought to have. See, it already started. He was sober when he was talking about this, but he noticed that even though he was sober, there were other people that were sober that seemed to have something besides mere physical sobriety, i.e. they weren't crazy. I noticed that others seemed to have such a release of happiness as something I thought a person ought to have. I was trying to find the answer. I used to run around to meetings, follow these guys for 20 years, 25 years, 30 years, go to step meetings, everything, because I would listen to them. I'd say to myself, I couldn't understand. I was a trial attorney. I used to try murder cases and stuff like that. I couldn't understand how they could sit at a table and extemporaneously just talk about shit. You know what I mean? And it made sense. And I didn't. Listen. Like, I play golf. I used to play golf. I don't play golf anymore. It's a waste of time for me. I'm not putting down anybody who plays golf, but I play golf. I play golf. I got Titleist clubs. I got the best, all the stuff. And Tiger Woods plays golf, and he uses the same equipment I use. So I play golf, and Tiger Woods plays golf. But trust me, we're playing a different game. We're playing a different game. And I was doing AA. And some of these guys I was following around were doing AA, and I knew they were doing a different game. So it says this: I noticed that others seem to have such release of happiness as something I thought a person ought to have. I was trying to find the answer. I knew there was even more, something I hadn't got. And believe me, if there's one thing I knew as I was growing up in AA, is that there was something some people had in here. Not everybody. I'd go to these AA meetings. You ever go to AA meetings? And I would go to AA meetings, and people would complain about their problems. They would complain about their problems. There's nothing wrong with complaining about their problems. Sometimes I'd go to AA meetings, you'd have a lot of people complain about their problems, and I have to go to another meeting just to get over the meeting that I was just at. You ever been in one of those and said, man, I was doing okay before I got here, and that kind of shit. And it was a place where you complained. My mother did this, my father did this, they did this, blah, blah, blah. It's just a bunch of complaints. And, of course, it would help if people would say after maybe you wouldn't drink, but it was a bunch of people complaining about how life has fucked them over and how screwed up things are and everything like that. But there were every once in a while, there'd be a guy there that you'd see all the time, usually had like 20, 30 years, and he never complained. And he was happy. And he was helpful to people. And you knew he was there. He was the guy you wanted. He was the guy when the mic was going around and some guy was complaining for 20 minutes about his problem, and then my cat died and I didn't know what to do with that. You would want to get up to him and slap the shit out of him and say, give the mic to Sam. I'm not here to hear your bullshit. I want to hear what Sam has to say. I want to hear what that guy has to say. And of course that's where you learn something called patience and tolerance, Although I always wish that someone would stand up and just, but then again, what if I was the guy who was complaining, It says this, so this is what it says. I noticed that others seem to have such release of happiness as something I thought a person ought to have. I was trying to find the answers. I knew there was a way I could get 30 or 40 years sobriety in 3 weeks, I knew there was even more, something I hadn't got. And I remember one day, a week or two after I'd come out of the hospital, Bill was at my house talking to my wife and me. We were eating lunch. They were eating that tuna fish sandwich, and I was listening and trying to find out why they had this release that they seem to have, that we all want, or you really should want, Bill looked across at my wife and said to her, this is what he said, this is what Bill said. So don't blame me, Henrietta, the Lord with a capital L. So I know who he was talking about because I'm of that ilk. The Lord has been so wonderful. Apparently nobody had told him he's killing newcomers. Henrietta, the Lord has been so wonderful to me, curing me of this terrible disease, that I just have to keep talking. I just want to keep talking about it and telling other people. I think I have the answer. Forget about my personality. I know it sucks, but this is Bill Dotson, the guy in the bed. I think I have the answer. Bill was very, very grateful that he had been released from this terrible thing, and he had given God, not a higher power, not the great monkey, not it. You can't have a relationship with it, You see, there's Rachel there, If somebody says, do you know Rachel? I don't say, oh, I know it. You can't have a relationship with it. You can't.
Nope.
My car is it. You know what I mean? My job is it. You can't. You only have a relationship with him or her or a human being. I mean, once you call God it, you've already decided there is no God. It's something like your car. At 3 o'clock in the morning, you got cancer. It ain't going to help you. That's why they say God is everything or he is nothing. See, the relationship with him is right. It's about having a relationship with a real person. Now, he may not be like a person like you think he's a person, but the same feeling as a close friend. That's what it is. If a mere code of morals or a better philosophy of life would help us, we'd be sober a long time. But that shit don't help. Having a concept of, oh yeah, I believe God. Well, you believe it? Really? Well, do you believe God? He says, what are you talking about? I said, you say you believe in God. Do you believe God? He says, what are you talking about? I said, so you don't believe God. You don't believe in God. You believe in the concept of God. Like some sort of concept that's in your mind. There's a God, a concept, but you have no idea what you're talking about. You can't stay sober on a concept. Because that comes out of your mind and you're crazy. These guys didn't believe in a concept. They called him Lord, they called him God. They knew it was the real deal for them. And it says, I think I have the answer. Bill was very, very grateful that he had been released from this terrible thing and he had given God the credit for having done it. He's so grateful about it, he wants to tell other people about it. That sentence, the Lord has been so wonderful to me, curing me of this terrible disease. I just want to keep telling people about it. It has been a sort of golden text for me, the text for the A program for me, and that's the deal. So I got a story. We got time for this, so I'm going to give you a little story about this deal. And this is where my vision comes in. I'm 6 months sober, and I'm happy about being sober. And I'm going to meetings. I love AA and all that sort of stuff. And I'm 6 months sober, so I'm also crazy. I haven't. It's still crazy, but I mean, And my sponsor takes me to a place called the Keynote Group. I don't even think the Keynote Group's still around, but I mean, it was on 67th Avenue. There's a couple hundred people there, and some guy's giving a talk, and the guy's named Al. Who is it? Al. That guy was
Al Cunningham?
no, the guy that I always talk about.
Al
Kennedy.
Al Kennedy.
Al Kennedy, right? Okay. Yeah, it's a sad
Thank
situation.
you,
Well,
Peanut
don't laugh at
Gallery.
me. We'll see how you guys are doing at 75 years of age.
Al Kennedy.
Al Kennedy. And some guy I've never seen before named Al Kennedy. He's like my age now. And he's got like 40 years. And he gives a talk. And I love AA talks. I love good AA talks. And I'm listening to this talk. I'm like Mary at the home, the home of Martha and Mary in a biblical story. I'm watching him. And I'm listening to him, and I'm like involved and focused on him, and here's the story. If you ask me what he said, I can't remember a word he said. I can't remember one word that guy said, but all I knew is I'm sitting there listening to him, and I'm saying to myself, man, I wish I could be like that guy. I wish I could. He was a man's man, and he was talking to those 200 people. Like he was in like their living room. I mean, there was like no pretense. There was no fear. He was just like wearing life like a loose garment. He was just relaxed. And I said, man, I wish I could do that. I wish I could do that. I can't do that. And I remember Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid. Anybody ever see that movie? Yeah. Where they're being followed by the posse and they can't shake them. And the Sundance Kid says, who are those guys? He says, can you do that? I can't do that. Could you do that? He says, no, I can't do that. I'm looking at this guy with wonder. And he's an alcoholic. He's going to meetings, but I've never seen anything like that. And so he leaves, and everybody, says, claps and says thank you, and he leaves. And here's the interesting thing. Here's the vision thing. And I had a whole, and I said, that's incredible, that you could do something like that and be that way and have that thing, and get that thing. And I was a nothing. I was always going to be a nothing. I used to put something in my body that turned me into an almost. When you're a nothing, almost is like top of the world. I mean, I had a drink to be like that, you know what I mean? And he was like that, and he wasn't drinking. And so I sit down with my sponsor. I said, man, that guy was great. I said, what meetings do you think he goes to? I'd like to hang out and hear what he has to say. And my sponsor turns to me and says, this is the same guy, by the way, who said, how would you feel if it didn't bother you? He was always talking to me in ways like it didn't make any sense. So I'm used to him not making sense.
Terrible.
Well, let me this way. He made a lot of sense. He just didn't make any sense to me. You understand what I'm saying? So I'm used to him answering a question with a question, or something like that. And so I said, so where do you think he hangs out? I want to, hang out with him. He says, well, no, he's dying. He's dying. I said, no, I'm talking about the guy up there. I want to know where he's hanging. He says, he's dying. I said, no, Bob, you're not understanding me, This guy, Al Kennedy, just spoke. He says, I want to know what group he says, Russ, he's dying. He's got 6 months to live. He's got cancer. Now, you're talking about a guy, if I have a hangnail, that's good for 5 meetings. You know what I mean? If I'm broke or something like that, I mean, I'm sitting there, I'm sucking my thumb in the middle of the night. You know what I mean? And 6 months later, he was dead. I just watched the guy show up with 200 people and do a meet. And I said, one of the things I said to him, he said he didn't say anything about dying, because believe me, if I was dying, I mean, you guys know all about it. I'd say, it's nice being at the St. Palms groups. I love being here. I'm dying, but it's okay. I'm going to get something out of that fucking thing. You know what I mean? And I get something, And I said, he didn't say anything about dying. He says, I know. He says, but I'm just telling you the truth. That's the deal. So can you even imagine? I'm not sure you can imagine. You'd have to be there. You'd have to see it happen. That you watch something like that happen, and then the guy leaves, and they say, he's dying of cancer, and he didn't mention it. Listen, my mind went, it was no longer about not drinking. I want to know how you get that drug. How do you get the drug where you're not scared of dying and you just want to help other people? Where do you get that deal from? You know what I mean? Now, I just realized, I'll tell you something I realized after that. I thought that was the most amazing thing. I've been talking about that meeting ever since I had 6 months. I've been talking about that guy all over the world. Every time I talk about Al Kennedy. You know what I'm talking about? Because it changed my whole life and my perception of things. As about what you could become, what the vision could be, where this thing could take you. I mean, if you settle for not drinking, you're an idiot. You know, an idiot. But there's one thing I realized that I never realized before. Now this is just a guess. I'm the only guy who got that out of that meeting. When I say I'm the only guy, there's perhaps somebody else, but because it wasn't even the talk he gave, because I don't remember the talk he gave. I never remember the talk he gave. It was the fact that I watched this man get up there and give a talk. And he was excited, and he was loving on people and everything like that. And he was dying. And I guess I was the only one who knew that. I mean, they probably had friends that, you know, but because I sat there and my sponsor said, you know, he's dying. Now, maybe there's other people who got that, but it's entirely possible they just left and said, well, that was a good AA talk, you know. I like that guy, but they didn't know that the whole thing, the miracle, was emotional sobriety. That was the real deal. And that had to do with faith. That had to do with what Bill Wilson was talking about. Lord has been so. That had to do with faith. Now, that doesn't mean the whole book has to do with faith. Now, that doesn't mean you have to believe in God or anything like that. You don't have to do any of that stuff. You have to decide whether you want to be like Al Kennedy. Because as you go along in Alcoholics Anonymous, I promise you, you will run into Al Kennedys. You will run into Al Kennedys. You may not even know they're Al Kennedys. You will run into Al Kennedys, and you may decide that you're not going to hang out with the Al Kennedys because you don't want what Al Kennedy has. Because the whole point is you want what somebody has, and you're only going to emulate to get it. You may just hang out in the parking lot with the guys that are talking about the Dolphins or something, you know, or you may be one of those guys that are following these guys that you think are Al Kennedy all over the place. Al Grossman or different people. There are people. I mean, you'll find them. They're here. They're around. And one day, you're gonna be 10 years or 15 years or 20 years sober, and you're gonna start experiencing that stuff about the loneliness if you do, and you're gonna be baffled because you're gonna be working the steps, and you're gonna be sponsoring people, and you're gonna be doing this thing, going to a lot of meetings, and you're gonna realize, you know, it's gonna be like the Peggy Lee music song. Is that all there is? You know. You're not going to be drinking, but it ain't going to be working for you. You're not going to be happy with your sobriety. And then you'll remember maybe Al Kennedy or some of the Al Kennedys around there, stuff like that. And you remember what we're talking about tonight. And because I don't know how to explain it, but if the only thing you want is not drinking, and that's okay for a new person. Let me tell you something. For years, it was like, hey, I haven't had a drink today. My sponsor once said to me, Russ, you could fuck up your entire life. If you haven't had a drink, you're a victor. You've won. And I believe that. And I do believe that. You know what I mean? But there will come a time where you'll have 10, 15 years and you won't be drinking, but you'll want something. You'll be like that guy. But he said, I knew there was something more. And you'll be thinking about what you don't have. Not only the not drinking thing. And it's just going to happen over and over again. Repeated humiliations and things like that. And you're going to want more. And it's going to have to do with faith. And you're going to want, and you may not understand it. You may not understand God. You may have started off like that, but you're going to say, I want Al Kennedy sobriety. I want Dr. Bob sobriety. I want that sobriety. And I know that has something to do with God. And you'll start trying to hang around those people or not. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you.